If adventure has a name, it must be Indiana Jones.
Velkommen til Filmz TV. En af filmhistoriens mest elskede filmføljetonger er omsider ude på Blu-ray, nemlig Steven Spielbergs 4 film om den eventyrlystne arkæolog Indiana Jones, spillet af Harrison Ford. Jagten på den forsvundne skat, Indiana Jones og templets forbandelse, Indiana Jones og det sidste korstog og Indiana Jones og krystalkraniets kongerige følger alle med i Paramounts lækre Blu-ray-udgivelse, som tilmed indeholder timevis af fremragende ekstramateriale. Lige fra alle de oprindelige biograftrailere til flere hidtil usete dokumentarer og adskillige slettede scener, som bør få fans ud af stolene. En af de slettede scener besvarer til med et af seriens største tilbagestående spørgsmål: hvordan i alverden overlevede Indiana Jones ubådturen i jagten på den forsvundne skat? Og svaret er åbenbart, at han holdt fast på bådens periskop under hele turen. Jamen dog. Dagens Filmz TV kommer ikke til at byde på nogen længere anmeldelse af udgivelsen, for sådan en kan du finde inde på Filmz. I stedet bringer vi et helt eksklusivt interview med selveste John Rhys-Davies, som spiller en af franchisens mest populære bifigurer, den egyptiske udgraver Salah, som er en af Indiana Jones' bedste venner. Vi fik lejlighed til at ringe til den 68-årige engelske skuespiller, som også er kendt som den heroiske dværg Gimli fra Ringenes Herre-filmene. Og først og fremmest var det jo oplagt at spørge, om Rhys-Davies stadigvæk er overrasket over, at Indiana Jones-filmene fortsat formår at høste massevis af nye fans, nu mere end 30 år efter biografpremieren på seriens første film.
Surprised? I'm no longer surprised, actually. When you have had more than, I suppose I probably had more than 100 or 150 people, some sober and wise and mature, coming up to me and said, well, you know, the reason I became a professor of archaeology was because I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark. It brought a huge number of people into archaeology, and in terms of its ongoing appeal, it's extraordinary because I'm now meeting grandfathers at fan conventions who come along with their sons, whom they showed Raiders of the Lost Ark to, and they're coming along with the next generation as well. So sometimes you get 3 people, 3 generations of Indiana Jones fans, and it's all this great bonding thing between 3 generations of fathers and sons. It's wonderful.
Do you remember your first reaction when you read the script? I mean, because it's a movie that's so pacey and energetic. Did that come across when you read it on paper?
Do you know, when my agent sent me the script, he said, well, what do you think? And I said, look, this reads like a comic book. I mean, I've never seen a script anything like this. This is either going to be the biggest disaster of all times, or it might just set a new fashion in filmmaking. He said, well, you're interested, obviously. I said, yes, you bet. I'd love to work with Spielberg. Yes, absolutely. It was clear from the outside, you know, that this was one of those big, long gambles. And it was the absolute flowering of the genius of Spielberg that made this thing work. And looking at the extended behind-the-scenes thing, it's clear to how you can see the emerging genius of Harrison as well. Harrison really knows how this character must be shaped, how the timing of scenes has to be right. It is an extraordinary tribute to the development of a young leading man, I think, as well.
Obviously, you worked on both the first and the third Indiana Jones films. And when Spielberg did Raiders of the Lost Ark, he was already an established name in Hollywood, but, you know, following the success of Raiders and E.T. and so on, he had become one of the biggest names on the planet when the third one came out. How would you compare the Steven that you worked with in 1981 with the one that you worked with in 1989?
Well, don't forget the 1981 Steven was just recovering from the rather wounding criticisms of 1941, which, looking back on, is really a near masterpiece in itself, you know. But at the time, critics were dismissing it, you know, and the scuttlebutt had it, well, you know, the boy wonder, is really a couple of shots, and he's lost his mojo or whatever it is that he had, and but Raiders reestablished it, and reestablished it in abundance. That here was one of the defining directors of all time. By the time we get to the third one, rather, he had done all the directing in his head of the piece. It was really a question of getting it down on paper. In a way, it wasn't quite as fluid and as spontaneously being put together as the first one. It was more, I know how this must work. I don't need to experiment anymore. I know exactly how these pieces must be put together. You would imagine that working with two alpha males on the same picture could be rather stressful. In fact, it was a wonderful synthesis. Sean is a force of nature in his own right. He arrived by helicopter from Monaco, I think, on the Monday morning, shot Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and descended into the clouds on late Friday evening, going back home, having finished his lot in the film. It was like Zeus Cronion descending for a quick week.
Unfortunately, you weren't in the fourth Indiana Jones film. I know you've previously said that they'd written Sallah into the script, but that the part was so insignificant that you declined. But would you be up for a fifth one if the part was right?
In a New York moment. But I suspect that he won't be in it. I think the times have changed. You see, if it isn't set in the Middle East, why would you need Sallah anyway? And somehow I think the moment has gone for the Sallah of the world. I think the world has changed, the world has moved on. But I don't for a moment decry the fun that I had in 1 and 3. In fact, I did tell Steven the other day, I said, you do realize that the best ones are 1 and 3. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, and your point is?
Husk, at du kan finde alle vores tidligere Filmz TV-udsendelser på Filmz under Filmz TV-fanebladet, og også på video.dk, i iTunes og via vores gratis video-app.